Are you an educator? Are you a person where at the end of the day you feel tired and exhausted? Well, I do believe that there's a way where if we can find the correct skills, the missing things that we need, we can have amazing days and finish our days with energy or with more energy anyway, so that you can go home and have a pleasant evening, pleasant weekends. So let's see if we can talk about how teachers can find ways to have more energy in their day so that they can go from September or the beginning of the school year until the first break, second break, all the way to the end of the school year. So good evening. My name is Alain Faber, and I've been teaching for more than 25 years. Grade 7, 8, 9, all the way to grade 10, grade 12 here in Ontario, Canada. Been teaching science, been teaching French, geography, history, and a whole bunch of different topics. And I'm here to share some of my ideas and insight on how we can make sure we have more energy in our classroom, but also in our personal time so that we can enjoy every days as we are going through the school year. So welcome to the podcast today. So the podcast will be divided in three big sections today. So I'm changing a little bit how my podcast format is to try to talk about more teachers' experience and also bring some insight. And to be open, I asked actually AI to come up with ideas of topics for podcasts. And the topics I have for today is why many teachers burn out or feel exhausted and how to avoid it. And the three parts we're going to look into today will be the first one, creating sustainable teaching practices and routines. Second, building a support network within your department. And third, developing work-life boundaries while maintaining excellence. Now, keeping in mind that my experience has been at the high school level, and therefore these will be my contribution to the profession. So let's see. So our first topic today will be about creating sustainable teaching practices and routine. Now, regardless if you are in elementary school, regardless if you are part of a team or in high school, if you have an agenda of what you need to do during the daytime, if you have an agenda for your staff meeting, if you have an agenda with what you need to do, you always get a lot more done. So I do believe that as a professional, I also need an agenda, but an agenda not just for the school day, but for my days as a whole. And I've been learning that from the business world. And let's see if I can share with you some of the input I have with respect to my schedule. So first of all, when I plan my day, I always plan it where it starts about 2 hours before I leave for school in the morning. So in those 2 hours, I have the time when I have the bell, or the alarm, half an hour to relax in my bed so I can relax nicely. I have an hour to get ready, make sure that the whole family is ready to start the day, and then get ready with lunch to leave. So what happens is that I plan 2 hours before I leave, and therefore I feel prepared when I leave. Some people, sometimes they just have the alarm, rush out the door, and I don't think it's the best way to appreciate all the advantages of having amazing days. Now, I have during the school day what I called let's see. I bring my routine. So my school day starts at 8:05. So when I get to school, 10 to 8 all the way to 3, there's a block of teaching that I have right there. So that block includes teaching time, lunchtime, prep time. And during that time, I do not use my phone at all. So I check for my social media and messages in the morning before I get in the building, and I check my messages after the school. And the reason for that is that when I go in the building, I'm focusing on what needs to be done in the school. And therefore, I'm putting aside my personal life. I focus on what I need to do. Therefore, I can focus my energy on what I need to do. So that's the time I have during the day. And on top of that, with respect to what I do in my prep time, because I focus during the day solely on the teaching part, I spend my day to do my classes, teach, and also plan for the following day or the following week. And the reason for that is that I become, during the day, all about pedagogy. So I'm focusing on what I need to do. I know what I have to think about, and therefore I don't have to worry about what are all the other things that needs to happen. Indeed, during that time, I have a focus on communication with parents, with the administration to make sure that my day runs smoothly. Now, on top of that, some of you says, well, we have marking to do. As a teacher, you've got to do marking. Well, what I do usually, well, I've started that in the last year. So it took me 24 years to be able to put that into place. But this year, what I've been doing, I've been focusing on school and pedagogy and setting up my classes from 8 to 3. And from 3 to 3:30, I take time for myself. And often what I do, I go and drive around. My car is like my safe haven. And I go to a place where I can have a coffee. And I always try to focus on marking for an hour. Now, I put an hour of marking for a few reasons. If I go home, there's no way I can mark because there's so many things going on. So I take sometimes for coffee, I do some marking for 1 hour. So in my mind, I'm going to focus on 1 hour of marking and that's it, nothing more. And the reason for that is that marking can be tiring. However, if I do 1 hour of marking at, between 3 and 4, 3:30 to 4:30 every day, that's 5 hours of marking when I have the energy. And after that, I have time. I usually go to the grocery store if I need to, go home and get dinner ready. So by that time, usually I have done all the things I need to do. I never work or rarely work on what I have to do for school because I use my productive time during the daytime to work on that. And because I focus on work, when I'm at work, when I'm home, I can focus on home life, personal life, and make sure that if I have some growth project, I can work on these. And I do believe that it is important. Now, after dinner, what do I do? Amazingly speaking, I've got some between 7:30 and 9. I've got 2.5 hours where I can do what I want to do. And that's important because if you have some time that you can give yourself during the day, gives you a chance to recharge, do things that you enjoy to do, reading, you can go for walks, you can go and with friends, you can do things that brings you energy. Well, I have to say that every so often I have to take a day to do cleaning. Well, cleaning's got to be done. But still, having a schedule during the day from the morning to the evening where I set times. For me, set time for the work and set time for personal time makes a big difference. Because you know what? If you create a schedule for the day for your work, but if you create a schedule for your life too, what happens is that you can live life with intention, or you can have, what is the word? Um, every so often when you are looking forward to doing something, you always have more energy than if you have to do something. So planning it, you get to play instead of having to do unplanned activities. So I think creating sustainable teaching practices and routine is important at school, but if you bring it into your life, that would help. Because to be honest with you, we just had the winter break, and there's a few days where I had nothing planned, I had no schedule, and for a few days, nothing got done. Because having a schedule, having a time when you dedicate your time for growth, for what you want to do, is amazing. And before we go to the next subject, I'm going to just make sure that I have sound for everyone. I have sound so we can actually continue here. Wonderful. We're going to go to our second topic today, which will be about building a support network within your department. Now, this is not always easy. For example, in my school, I work in 2 different buildings, so there's some staff, even in December, after 4 months of a school year, I've met someone I did not know, even though we've been working in the same school for 4 months. So 2 buildings creates sometimes limits on people you can talk to. But how do you build a support network? Well, I do believe that the support network can work within our department. That means that we talk about the similar topics. We can talk about how we can help students more. And I think if you start discussing with your colleagues, that's a great way to do better. Now, the reason why in the first segment of this podcast, I mentioned that I focused on teaching and pedagogy and planning during the daytime is that it brings the mindset of the discussions I have with my colleagues. And I think that if I bring this idea that I can share ideas about pedagogy on how to do what's best for students, I think it leads some of the conversation. Because sometimes when you have unstructured conversations, it is nice for some, but personally, I'm not a person who will do chit chat just for fun. I like to do conversations with intention. And therefore, it allows me to be more productive, to be able to have great exchanges and then learn from interactions with others. And I think that's important. So here, some of the notes I had was helping hands. So when you have helping hands within a department, it allows you to share resources. It allows you to share best practices. It also allow you to say, okay, well, if you have a colleague in your class, in your department, you say, hey, you have a prep time. If you want to visit my classroom, you're welcome to do so. Because we can learn through books, we can learn through videos, but being able to go in a classroom, seeing how teachers are doing their routine and how they approach learning, it's always a great way to become a better teacher as well. So helping hands is important. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we have two buildings. So I work with colleagues that are not necessarily teaching the same thing as me. But what is interesting is that even though we may teach different topics, it allows us to stay focused on what is best for students, and therefore the interactions can be as positive as possible. That's my perspective anyway. Another idea here is about sharing resources. Now, with computer and cloud-based storage of information, it's very easy to share resources. So keeping in mind that resources can be shared within a department, but if you work in a district, if you work in a province, in a state, even internationally, there's a lot of good resources that can be done, sharing videos and learning opportunities. That's one of the reasons I have this YouTube channel where I do YouTube videos on scientific topics in English and in French on my other YouTube channel. That's something I like to do, and I share with my colleagues as well and other people around the world. The other thing I like about how to build a support network is to have discussion times that are possible when you are sitting with teachers of your departments or with other people from other departments or even different schools. And then you are working on planning. Now, I had an experience in November. We had a professional development day, and I was sitting with other teachers. And instead of talking about pedagogy, what we were looking into was how can we plan the next 3 weeks. So it was at the end of November. There were 3 weeks to go in December. So we worked on saying, how about we plan what we could do in the last 3 weeks of 2024? And what was interesting is that it took a few minutes to decide what we were to do. But then we had an amazing discussion for about 20 minutes on how we could approach the topic to cover. And we also shared resources so that within that discussion, it was about 30 minutes. We had a chance to do some planning, but also share amazing resources and also share with each other how we do different activities with our classroom. Because the beauty of having focused conversations is that you're always trying to find ways to be better at what you do. It works with the trades. If you're a plumber or a mason, if you work with other people, you can learn tricks of the trades so you can get better. If you're in teaching, you have the tricks of the trades. If you're an engineer, that's the same thing. So the whole idea here is finding time for discussion is amazing. Good. The third topic we're going to do today will be about developing work-life boundaries while maintaining excellence. So I mentioned that a little bit earlier. What my secret is using blocks of time. So I use blocks of times with my classroom. So when I start a classroom, I always put on the board the 5 or 6 activities we do. So I always have the date. I have good morning, good afternoon, or bonjour. If it is in French, then I write down the activities before a short break and the activities after the short break. It does a few things for me. When I put it on the board, it allows me to clear my mind and leave everything else outside the hallway, outside the classroom in the hallway, so I can focus on my students who need me at that time. Then I read the agenda with the students, and I notice that everybody knows exactly what we will be working on, including the break we do halfway. And what's interesting is that sometimes if a topic is exciting, people are following along, they have a break, they can chat about the information, and we continue after the break. If it happens that the lesson is, because sometimes my lessons are not always exciting, but we say, okay, we have to do this. Let's see if we can go through. But in 30 minutes or so, we have a break coming up. So it always makes the harder pieces of information to share, the more difficult aspect of lessons sometimes, or discovery activities, to make it go faster, knowing that there's a break coming up after 35 minutes. And those 5 minutes that I give in breaks, I do need these 5 minutes. It allows me to take a breather. It allows me to answer specific questions with my students, but also to build relationships with my students, talking about what's going on after class, what happened before class, and having a discussion to build the relationship needed where people feel comfortable so that when they come to my class, they are ready to learn. So that's how I do things, and it's been working nicely for several years. The other one I have here with respect to developing work-life boundaries is about communication. So if you are a teacher or an educator, you know that a lot of communication happens um, through emails, through in electronic ways. And what happens is that you can be available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But something that I have done specifically was to not include on my phone anything related to work. So I have my personal information, personal emails, that is great, but nothing for work. And the reason for that is that when I go to work in the morning, I can focus on email communications and what the school needs to do. They're available from 7:45 all the way to 3:30 without any difficulties. However, as soon as 3:30 happens, then I stop. I do not check emails. I do not respond to any individuals. And the reason for that is that I've given many hours of my life to the school, to my students. And at that time, I need to take time back. And that's important because if you spend time with, when you're at work, you think about what's going on at home. If you're at home, you think about what's going on at work. Then there is exchange of energy. And sometimes they're not put in the right place. And therefore, teachers can feel drained. So if you remember when I said at the beginning, so as a teacher, we're always looking for ways where we have more energy because we feel tired. We can feel exhausted at the end of the day. And it does happen to me as well. But those boundaries that I've been putting has been helping a lot. And what's interesting is that my students also know that I do, because I tell them I do not pick up emails after 3 and I'm there the day after. So what they do, if they need to talk to me, they talk to me without any problem during the day. If they have an email, they know that I will answer them. If I see them later in the day, I answer their email at lunch. If they see me in the morning and they have a question, I will answer questions at the end of the day without any problems. But this, I remember years ago, I would go and check my emails because I was doing planning in evenings, and people would send me an email at 5, 6, 7 p.m. I've seen people during even COVID, emails were coming at 1 in the morning, 3 in the morning, and they were expecting answers within an hour or within minutes sometimes. And it is not something that I am willing to do. And there are two reasons for that. One, I'm protecting my personal time, and my students know when I'm focused on them. And second, I forget what it is. That's interesting. I had a memory blank. And this, so the idea here is to have, so I know when I have my personal time after, I have a memory blank where I lost the thought. It happens. Let's see if I can go back. So if I'm at work during the daytime, focus. Oh yes, the other thing is that my students also know that if they're at school in my classes, they will focus during the day, but they don't have to focus on my class during the evening because I'll be there for them 100% the day after. And that means that it's also showing my students that it's okay to work hard and being focused during the day, but it's okay to have a personal life and focus on what they want to do. They're part of a team, if they're doing amazing hobbies, if they are volunteering, taking care of family members, or just enjoying each other's company in a family or watching a show without wondering or worrying about the school. Because if you think of students going to school during the day and then spending hours in the evening to do homework, I don't think it's showing them what a good work-life balance is. If students can learn what that it is important to focus their time when it's needed and where it's needed so that they can focus on what they want to do after school, indeed. And these are the topics I have for you today with this podcast called Why Many Teachers Feel Burnout and How to Avoid It. Or, as I mentioned, as a teacher, we're always looking for ways to have energy at the end of the day so we can appreciate our own lives with people that we love. On this, if you have any clarification questions, experience you'd like to share with us, put them in the comments below. I'm always looking at them and responding them. It's always a pleasure to read from you. Otherwise, we're going to see you next week when I'll talk about the next topic. And the next topic I have here, the first 10 minutes of class can make or break your lessons. So we're going to talk about this next week. On this, I'll see you at 7:30 next Wednesday. Bye-bye. There we go. Have a